You probably think she changed. One day she was warm, curious, engaged, and then slowly, she wasn't. Fewer messages, less touch, less interest, and in your mind, the story became simple. She changed. But here's the uncomfortable truth most men never sit with. She didn't change. She adapted to you. She learned you. She knew what you'd say, how you'd react, when you'd show up, and when you wouldn't. And once there was nothing left to discover, nothing left to feel into, attraction didn't explode. It faded quietly. Predictability feels safe. It feels loyal. It feels mature. But desire doesn't live in safety alone. It lives in tension, in movement, in the sense that something is still unfolding. And when you stopped evolving, when your emotional posture became guaranteed instead of chosen, she didn't leave because she was confused or unstable. She left because nothing in you pulled her forward anymore. And if that stings, good. Because this isn't about blame. It's about seeing clearly for the first time what actually happened. The easiest explanation is always the most comforting one. She changed. It protects your pride and gives your confusion a clean answer. If she changed, then you didn't miss anything. You didn't fail to notice a shift. You didn't become complacent. But that story isn't true. It's just soothing. Saying she changed keeps your self-image intact. It turns attraction into something random, emotional, unpredictable, something that happened to you, not something that slowly dissolved while you stayed the same. Here's what's harder to admit. She didn't wake up different. She woke up already knowing you, knowing how you'd respond, knowing when you'd reassure, knowing that you'd stay, no matter how little tension remained. And once your presence became assumed instead of chosen, nothing in her had to reach anymore. Men often confuse consistency with presence. They show up reliably, but they stop showing up alive. The gestures stay, the routines stay, the words stay, but the edge disappears. And when there's no edge, there's no pull. Not because she's broken, not because she wanted drama, but because attraction doesn't survive certainty alone. That's the lie most men hold on to, not because it's convincing, but because letting it go would force them to look inward. When men hear predictable, they think routines, same schedule, same habits, same daily rhythm, and they tell themselves that stability is a virtue, because it is. But predictability isn't about structure. It's about emotional certainty. It's the moment she knows how you'll react before you react, when your reassurance arrives on cue, when your absence never creates space, when nothing about you introduces friction, mystery, or tension anymore. She doesn't have to feel into you. She already knows. And once that happens, polarity starts to flatten. Not suddenly, quietly, because desire isn't sustained by chaos, but it does require uncertainty, the sense that something in you is still moving forward. When your emotional posture becomes fixed, when your responses become guaranteed, attraction has nowhere to lean. There's no stretch, no pull, no curiosity left. This is where men get confused. They think being dependable should create desire. But dependability without depth creates comfort, not polarity. Predictability feels safe. It feels earned. It feels like love. But desire needs the possibility of surprise. Not games, not distance, just motion. And the moment she stops wondering who you're becoming, the dynamic starts to fade. Even if nothing looks wrong from the outside. A lot of men get stuck here. Why didn't she just tell me? If she had a problem, why didn't she say something? Why didn't she give me a chance to fix it? But attraction doesn't work like a checklist, and desire doesn't negotiate. When women sense a shift, they usually don't announce it. They signal it, subtly at first. Less initiation, less emotional friction, more independence. A quiet pulling back that tests whether something in you will move on its own. Not to punish you, but to see if you're still alive in the dynamic. Explaining desire feels unnatural because the moment you have to explain it, it's already fading, and asking for change often kills the very tension she's hoping will reappear. So she watches instead. She observes. She waits to see whether you notice the shift without being told, whether you respond with growth instead of reassurance, whether you evolve instead of manage. By the time she uses words, she's usually already detached. The explanation isn't an invitation, it's a conclusion. That's why so many men say, "I would have done anything if I had known." But what she was looking for wasn't effort. It was movement that didn't need to be requested. And once she realizes she has to explain herself just to feel something again, the emotional door has already started to close. There's a moment most men never notice. It's when she stops choosing you and starts assuming you. Not because she feels safe, but because she feels certain. Certain you'll be there. Certain you won't challenge her. Certain nothing in you will surprise her anymore. Your availability becomes automatic. Your presence becomes predictable. You're no longer someone she leans toward. You're simply there. This is where the shift happens. You didn't become less kind. You didn't stop caring. You just removed all emotional risk from the dynamic. And without risk, there's nothing to lean into. She doesn't feel met. She feels managed. Conversations start to feel efficient instead of electric. Affection becomes polite instead of charged. Everything works, but nothing moves. And from the outside, it looks fine. No fights, no drama, no obvious problem. But internally, the polarity has already flattened. When attraction shifts from chosen to guaranteed, it doesn't end loudly. It dissolves quietly. And most men only realize what happened once she's already gone. Not because she never cared, but because nothing in the dynamic asked her to care anymore. Let's be clear about something before this gets misunderstood. Being a good man is not unattractive. Kindness is not the issue. Integrity, loyalty, and emotional availability are not mistakes. The problem was never that you cared too much. It's that you stopped moving. You showed up. You were consistent. You did the right things. But over time, nothing about you stretched the dynamic anymore. No friction, no challenge, no sense that you were becoming someone new. A good man with direction creates polarity. A good man without movement creates comfort. And comfort isn't bad. It just isn't enough to sustain desire on its own. Attraction needs to feel something happening. A trajectory. A forward pull that isn't dependent on the relationship itself. When your emotional world becomes fully accessible, fully predictable, fully centered on her, the dynamic loses tension. Not because she wanted distance, but because there was nowhere left to lean. She didn't want drama. She didn't want dominance. She wanted to feel movement again. And when being good turns into being static, attraction doesn't disappear out of cruelty. It fades because there's nothing left unfolding between you. Predictability didn't happen by accident. It felt good. It felt earned. It felt like finally relaxing inside the relationship. Because predictability removes risk. When your reactions are known, you don't have to stand your ground. When your presence is guaranteed, you don't have to risk absence. When everything about you is emotionally accessible, you don't have to sit with tension or uncertainty. But here's the part most men miss. That comfort wasn't for her, it was for you. Being predictable protects you from conflict, from growth, from the discomfort of becoming someone new in real time. It lets you settle into a version of yourself that feels safe, familiar, and unchallenged. And slowly, without realizing it, you start playing not to lose, instead of playing to expand. She didn't lose interest because you became reliable. She lost interest because nothing in you was being tested anymore. No edges, no stretch, no sense that something meaningful was at stake. Predictability feels like peace, but peace without movement becomes emotional stagnation. And attraction doesn't die from malice, it dies from stillness. Attraction rarely ends with a moment. It ends with a gradual absence of feeling. No explosion, no betrayal, just a slow emotional flattening where nothing is wrong, but nothing is alive either. The relationship keeps functioning, but the current underneath it fades. This is why it feels so confusing in hindsight. There was no clear mistake to point to, no argument you could replay and fix, just a sense that something essential slipped away without asking permission. And that's because attraction isn't a moral judgment. It doesn't punish. It doesn't explain itself. It simply responds to what's present. When movement stops, when polarity disappears, desire doesn't fight to survive. It goes quiet. It conserves itself. It withdraws without making a scene. No one is the villain here. She didn't betray you. You didn't fail her. The dynamic just ran out of tension. And without tension, there was nothing left to hold attraction in place. That's the part most men never hear. Not because it's cruel, but because it's honest. And honesty, when it's this quiet, can be the hardest thing to sit with. What would have changed the outcome wasn't a better conversation, better timing, or more reassurance. It was movement, the kind that doesn't ask for permission and doesn't revolve around the relationship. A life that pulls you forward creates tension naturally, not by withholding, not by performing, but by having something at stake beyond being chosen. Direction restores polarity without effort. This doesn't mean becoming distant or emotionally unavailable. It means not outsourcing your sense of aliveness to another person. When your growth, curiosity, and inner pressure come from within, attraction has something to orient toward again. She never needed to be managed. She needed to feel that being with you meant being close to something unfolding. That's why the solution was never to change for her. It was to return to becoming yourself. A man in motion doesn't have to manufacture mystery. His life already contains it. And whether she stayed or not, that orientation would have changed everything. Because the moment you stop trying to preserve attraction and start living in a way that expresses you fully, something fundamental shifts. Not just in how you're seen, but in how you stand. She didn't change, and you weren't wrong. Nothing dramatic had to happen for attraction to fade. No betrayal, no failure, just a gradual stillness where growth paused and tension disappeared. Predictability felt like love because it felt safe. But desire lives where something is still unfolding, where a man isn't finished and his life isn't fully mapped. This isn't about blame or regret. It's about understanding what attraction quietly responds to. If there's a lesson here, it's not to become colder or more guarded. It's to stay in motion, to keep a part of yourself evolving, even when everything feels secure. Because the most compelling presence isn't perfect or permanent or fully known. It's alive. And attraction doesn't leave when someone changes. It leaves when nothing does.